He thought money bought him respect, that he could walk all over the people who cleaned the floors as if they were nothing more than the dust itself. He'd laugh loudly, surrounded by his yes-men, while she would just lower her eyes. But what he didn't know is that some silences do their work quietly, and when time restores a person's dignity, it doesn't need revenge, it only needs presence. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't point a finger, she simply arrived, like a lady, and silenced an entire room with a simple good evening. The Thorn Industries headquarters felt less like an office and more like a modern temple to vanity. Mirrored glass, imported marble, a reception desk that looked like the lobby of a five-star hotel. Inside, everything shined, except for the eyes of the woman who cleaned it all before the sun came up. Elena Vance always arrived before 6. The city was still yawning, but she was already scrubbing the floors with an almost ritualistic grace. She was petite, slender, with a firm posture and silent footsteps. She wore her uniform like a shield, not with pride, but with a quiet sense of honor. No one greeted her. Some would look away, as if her very presence was too inconvenient to acknowledge in the light of day. Others just pretended she was invisible. That included Marcus Thorn himself, owner of the company, an award-winning entrepreneur, a constant feature on the covers of business magazines. He was tall, tan, with a sharp gaze. He spoke softly, but always with a hint of contempt at the edges of his voice. That morning he was striding down the glass hallway when he saw Eleanor on her knees, wiping a scuff mark from the floor. He paused. He glanced down for just 2 seconds. Then a smirk played on his lips, and he walked on, without a word. But his secretary Jessica noticed. She whispered something that made them both share a discreet laugh. Elena didn't react. She finished her task, rose slowly, and disappeared into another wing of the building. It was just another day where no one saw anything, but everything was noticed. Elena Vance didn't say much, but she heard everything. She knew the names of every employee who showed up late, who spent the day pretending to work. She knew who saved their smiles for the boss and who exchanged knowing glances in the hallways. She even knew that Jessica, Marcus's personal secretary, couldn't wait to climb the corporate ladder, even if it meant stepping on the person who cleaned the floors. But Elena never got involved. She did her job, made every corner gleam, and at the end of the day she returned to a forgotten neighborhood on the edge of the city, where luxury never reached and time moved a little slower. Marcus, on the other hand, was the kind of man who was polite only to those who could do something for him. For everyone else, a nod was a favor. He believed kindness was a waste of time, and that status was maintained with distance. One late afternoon, he walked into the main conference room and found Elena finishing up, arranging the chairs. He stopped at the doorway, crossed his arms and said, without raising his voice, "Something's off in here. This room, it's losing its standard." Elena looked at him, trying to understand. This room has $1 million view, but if the first thing someone sees is a cleaning lady on her knees, it kind of kills the impact, don't you think? Jessica, who was right behind him, let out an undisguised laugh. Elena simply gave a slight nod and left the room without a word. No hurry, no anger. But in that moment she stopped being invisible, and that Marcus failed to notice. The following week, Thorn Industries hosted a corporate cocktail party for foreign investors. Everything was impeccable. A red carpet in the lobby, perfectly aligned waiters, carefully curated ambient music. Marcus wanted to impress, as always, and for that, every detail mattered. Elena had been assigned to keep the restrooms clean during the event. It wasn't ideal, but someone had to do it. She wore the same simple uniform, her hair tied back, her face clear. While the guests toasted with French champagne, she was quietly wiping an expensive lipstick stain from a sink. That's when Marcus walked in, laughing loudly, flanked by 3 investors and Jessica. He saw her, bent over, her hands wet, her face slightly flushed. He stopped at the door and, as if it were part of a performance, announced loudly, "The great thing about these parties is you see a little bit of everything, right? Even the people who are supposed to use the service entrance end up in the middle of the party." The men chuckled. Jessica covered her mouth, feigning shock. Eleanor froze for 2 seconds. Then she just picked up her cloth, wrung it out slowly, and continued cleaning as if she hadn't heard a thing. But she heard. Her silence was a scream to a passing intern, to an employee who pretended not to see, to a security guard who looked away, embarrassed. Marcus was already onto his next joke, soaking up the praise as usual. But that night, even among all the glitter, something began to lose its value, and she began to reclaim hers. 2 days after the party, Eleanor was called into the Human Resources office. The manager, avoiding eye contact, spoke in a neutral, almost rehearsed tone. "Elena, the board has decided to terminate your contract. The justification is personnel restructuring and profile realignment. We'll ensure you receive all your benefits, of course." Elena just nodded. She asked if she needed to sign anything. She signed. She said thank you. There was no farewell, no real explanation. But in the hallways, the whispers told a different story. "Marcus doesn't want her around here anymore." The sentence floated between employees as if it were normal, as if erasing a person was just part of the corporate game. On her way out, she carried her cloth bag with her folded uniform inside. No one said a word, not even a wave. At the bus stop, the sky began to change colors. Orange clouds bled into the city's grey haze. Elena boarded the nearly empty bus and took a seat by the window. Outside, the skyscrapers grew smaller. Her face was serene, but her gaze was resolute. When she got home, a small apartment that smelled of old coffee, she looked at a photo of her mother on the wall. Helen, a strong woman Eleanor had cared for until her last breath. It was for her that she had dropped out of college. It was for her that she had always worked in silence. That night, there were no tears, only silence, a silence she knew well. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, Elena pulled a box from the back of her closet. Inside were business textbooks, old course packets, certificates saved with care. She ran her hand over them. She took a deep breath. The humiliation stung, yes, but she had faced far greater losses, and this would not be the end. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere, just for being too simple? Have you ever had to swallow your pain in silence while others laughed at you? If that's ever happened to you, leave a yes in the comments. It's just so I know you felt this scene. Time doesn't ask for permission to pass. Before Elena knew it, 4 months had gone by since that final humiliation. But she hadn't been idle. With the little she had saved and the silent absence of her mother now resting in peace, Elena moved to a smaller city inland, a place with fewer lights but more possibilities. There, nobody knew who she was, and that was a blessing. She found a job at a small logistics company as an administrative assistant. It was a factory floor, stacks of paper, and old computers, but it was also an opportunity. And Eleanor always knew how to make the most of what the world gave her. At night, she studied. She retook classes, finally finishing the degree she had put on hold for over a decade. Books once again filled the space that sadness had occupied. The time that was once silence now became planning. She didn't tell anyone. Not about the humiliation, not about her past. She just kept going, step by step, like a plant growing in the dark. It was in a free, online specialization course that she met James Chen, a seasoned but genuinely human entrepreneur who was impressed by the clarity of Elena's writing in the course forums. He sent her a message, asking about her background, her perspective on business. "Are you in management?" She hesitated, then told him the truth. James wasn't bothered. Quite the opposite. 2 months later, he invited her to do some experimental consulting on a new project of his, and when she delivered a complete process restructuring plan with excellence and discretion, he had no doubts. I want you on the executive team for the New York project. Will you accept?" Elena accepted, but she made one condition. "I only want to be judged by my work. I don't want flatterers or people treating me differently." James smiled. "That's exactly why I want you there." And just like that, without any fanfare, Elena returned to the city that had erased her. But this time, she was the one holding the keys. The new headquarters for James Chen's company, Horizon Ventures, was in the same business district where Thorn Industries still operated. Mirrored skyscrapers, luxury cars, quiet cafes. It was the financial heart of the city, the same place where Eleanor had once been silenced, with no right to speak. That morning there was a networking event for partner companies. Marcus Thorne was scheduled to attend as a special guest. He had no idea, however, that the new director of operations for Horizon Ventures was none other than Eleanor Vance. She arrived right on time. She wore a discreet, elegant pantsuit, her hair styled with a firm but gentle hold. There was calm in her stride, and strength in her eyes, and silence, always that silence. When she entered the hall, Marcus was already there, surrounded by familiar faces, speaking loudly as always. It was Jessica, now an events coordinator, who saw her first from across the room. Her face froze for a split second. Marcus turned, curious, and he saw Elena. It took him 3 full seconds to place her. The smile faltered at the corner of his mouth. His eyes tried to conceal his shock, but it was too late. Elena simply walked toward the group, politely greeted the others, and when she extended her hand to him, she said, "Mr. Thorne, good morning." He held her hand for a moment longer than necessary, trying to project control, but his eyes couldn't lie. "Elena, it's been a while. You're looking well." "I am, thank you. Shall we begin?" And she turned to her team, leading the group with confidence. No provocation, no revenge, but there was something in her posture that no award, no car, no bank account could ever buy. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching her walk away. For the first time, he didn't know what to do with his hands, and for the first time, he was the one who felt invisible. The event proceeded formal and full of technical terms, growth projections, and rehearsed handshakes. But the closing remarks were hers. James had insisted that Elena give the final speech. She walked up to the small stage without ceremony. She held the microphone with both hands as if holding an old truth. When someone enters a room and is treated with respect, they flourish. But when they are treated as if they're invisible, they learn to grow in the dark, and sometimes that's where the roots grow strongest. The room fell silent. Success isn't the opposite of simplicity. The opposite of success is arrogance, and arrogance always pays a price. She glanced briefly toward Marcus, without holding his gaze for too long, and then she concluded, "Thank you for being here. May we all learn to recognize value, even when it isn't wearing a suit and tie." Applause. Some were slow to clap, others glanced around, uncomfortable. Marcus kept his chin up, but his eyes were somewhere far away. Elena came down from the stage with the same serenity she had when she went up. She didn't smile. She didn't provoke. She just walked to the back of the room and sat down, as if she had just stated something obvious, something no one else had ever had the courage to say. In that moment, there was no longer any doubt. She didn't need revenge. She had already won. Sometimes life doesn't give us weapons. It gives us silence, and it's in that silence that we learn to observe, to listen, and to grow from within. Elena didn't confront Marcus with shouting or hate. She didn't want to prove a point. She just wanted to exist with dignity, and for someone who always thought he owned the world, that was the greatest offense of all. Because there is a kind of strength that can't be bought, worn, or displayed. It's the strength of someone who walks through humiliation without losing their own essence, of someone who rebuilds themselves without making a sound. Marcus had luxury, influence, a stage. But Elena had something he never understood: roots, and in the end, It's always the roots that hold the tree steady when the wind changes. It isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward so completely that your very presence becomes a mirror. And the person who once tried to make you small can no longer look you in the eye. And when that happens, the game doesn't just turn, it simply ends. If this story touched you in some way, leave a like. That's how we know it's worth continuing to tell stories that matter. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Seriously, I read all of them, and I make a point to reply to everyone who takes the time to write. And if you believe in the power of stories that make us feel and think, subscribe to the channel. Every subscription is the fuel that keeps all of this going. Don't go just yet. Choose one of the stories on the screen and continue with us.